The wild card is a playoff spot given to a team that has failed to win its division, but is still deemed to be worthy of a playoff position as essentially the best of the rest. In the history of wild card teams, 7 have gone on to win the Super Bowl. They're listed below in the description. Our selection for the greatest ever wild card team pertains to the National Football League's 12-team postseason era. This is the story of the greatest of them all. If, after watching the video, you think there's a better wildcard team, drop a comment and we'll do a sports fans choice video on the most frequently named team. For now, this is our choice as the greatest wildcard team ever. Winners of Super Bowl XXXV, the Baltimore Ravens are revered as one of the all-time great defensive teams, with an offense that scored enough and at the right times. Baltimore shut out 4 of its regular season opponents on its way to a 12-4 regular season. In the playoffs, they beat the Broncos, Titans, Raiders, and Giants, allowing an average of fewer than 6 points per playoff game. The only defense considered comparable was the 1985 Chicago Bears. It didn't look like a Super Bowl season was in the offing prior to the season, as attention focused on a murder trial involving Ravens linebacker Ray Lewis. Originally arrested and charged with murder and aggravated assault, those charges were dropped in exchange for testifying against his companions. They would later be acquitted and no one else was ever charged. Lewis pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and was sentenced to probation. He was fined $250,000 by the NFL, but was cleared to play. Lewis would go on to be a cornerstone for the defense, which set NFL records for fewest points allowed at 165 and fewest rushing yards allowed at 970. Lewis won the NFL Defensive Player of the Year award and became only the second linebacker to be named Super Bowl MVP. A vital acquisition was the selection of running back Jamal Lewis with the 5th overall draft pick. He would lead the team in rushing with 85 yards per game and 6 touchdown runs. Under the leadership of second-year head coach Brian Billick and defensive coordinator Marvin Lewis, the Ravens jumped out to a 5-1 start. They shut out the Steelers, Bengals, and Browns in those first 6 weeks. It was clear, however, that work had to be done on the offensive side. The 4th and 5th wins came on the strength of 9 field goals by Matt Stover, without a single touchdown in either game. The season hit the skids with 3 of the team's 4 losses coming in succession as they dropped from 5-1 to 5-4. While the defense only allowed 10, 14, and 9 points in the 3 losses, the offense only scored 6 points in each game. The problem seemed to be at the quarterback position, as Tony Banks was connecting on only 54% of his passes. He couldn't engineer a touchdown scoring drive and was picked off 3 times in his final start. The season may have turned a corner in a loss as Trent Dilfer replaced the faltering Tony Banks at quarterback. By the following week, the offense was starting to hum as Dilfer threw for 244 yards and 3 touchdowns in a 27-7 win against the Bengals. If nothing else, Dilfer proved to be a capable game manager. While both he and Banks each started half the games and their stats were surprisingly similar, Dilfer did win 7 of his 8 games, and the Ravens were gaining much-needed momentum. The Ravens rattled off 7 straight wins, scoring nearly 28 points per game while allowing only 9.6. For the regular season, the stout Ravens defense allowed 10.3 points per game, an NFL record. The Ravens had split regular season games with division rival the Tennessee Titans, who grabbed the division title at 13-3. Baltimore at 12-4 was relegated to a wild card spot. If ever a team cruised through the playoffs, it was this Baltimore Ravens team. They welcomed the Denver Broncos to Baltimore by holding Gus Frerotte to 124 passing yards and an interception. They stuffed Mike Anderson to 40 yards rushing. The Broncos would only manage a second quarter field goal in the 21-3 loss. In what was clearly a tougher game in the third matchup against the Tennessee Titans, Baltimore would score a wild 14 points in the fourth quarter to win 24-10. While they did trail early, it was knotted at 10 going into the fourth quarter. They blocked a field goal and Anthony Mitchell returned it 90 yards for a touchdown. Then, Ray Lewis added a 50-yard pick six to seal the deal. The AFC Championship game at Oakland proved to be little contest as Baltimore jumped out in front 10-0 at halftime and never looked back. Baltimore won 16-3 with the highlight being a 96-yard touchdown pass to Shannon Sharpe. Oakland's quarterback, Rich Gannon, was forced from the game with an injury. He had thrown 2 interceptions and was sacked 4 times. They held Bobby Hoying to 107 yards passing, picking him twice as well. Hoying's 13 rushing yards led the Raiders as their running backs were stifled. Super Bowl XXXV has to go down in history as a bit of a dog. The New York Giants were smothered throughout, only scoring on this 97-yard kickoff return. Their offense had no hope. Kerry Collins threw for only 112 yards and was picked 4 times, with 1 returned for a touchdown by Dwayne Starks. Tiki Barber was held to 39 rushing yards. The Giants' wide receivers were hopeless, as Barber led the team in receiving with a paltry 26 yards. The Ravens dominated 34-7. If this game is remembered for any fireworks, it would be that there were 3 touchdowns scored on 3 consecutive plays. The Ravens returned an interception for a touchdown. The Giants' Ron Dixon returned the kickoff for a score. And the Ravens' Jermaine Lewis said, "Hold my beer," and did the same thing in return. Reminder, at the end of the season they had allowed 10.3 points per game. By the end of the playoffs, the Ravens had only allowed 188 points across 20 games. That's an average of 9.4 points per game. Against the stiffest competition of the season, they had actually improved their defensive performance immeasurably. They allowed fewer than 6 points per playoff game. If you think another wildcard team was the greatest ever, again, drop a note in the comments and we'll consider your input for a Fan's Choice video. If you enjoyed the video and perhaps even learned something new, hit subscribe and join the Sports Fan Sports family.